Good morning and good afternoon, depending upon where you're joining us from in the world today. I am excited that you all are here. This is part 2 of a 3-part series that we're conducting. So part 2 is recession proofing your business, and part 1 can actually be found on our YouTube channel if you're interested in catching yourself up if you weren't able to attend that one. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started with our part 2. First, a couple of introductions. I'm Elizabeth Tahunar. I'm a senior manager of customer success here at Totango, and I'm delighted to be joined by Emily Marcasello from ProctorU. Emily and I have the pleasure of working together. She is one of my customers, which is lovely for me. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Emily so that she can tell you a bit about ProctorU and, of course, herself.
Perfect. Good morning. As Liz said, my name is Emily Marcasello. I'm the Director of Customer Success for ProctorU, or now our new brand under Measure Learning. And what Measure Learning does is we delivered proctored exams for our professional testing clients, as well as the sector that I work in, which is higher education. So we have over 20 years of experience and can't wait to talk about risk today.
Excellent. So with that, we'll dive into our content. First, I want to talk a little bit about protecting your customer base, because when you're looking at stabilizing during uncertain times, protecting your customer base obviously comes to mind as a necessary action. So what should you know about that? First and foremost, customer success is the central life force of recurring revenue models. The reason that is because it's how loyalty is earned, where moments are won, and how recurring revenue multiplies. In order to really grow and maximize recurring revenue, though, you'll likely need to reorient your operating model from an acquisition-driven model to a value-driven model. The difference in the two is that an acquisition-driven model is more siloed, where metrics like bookings and ACV may be a main focus. However, in a value-driven model, there's a shared customer value focus. You're looking at customer outcomes, and your different departments like success, sales, product, and support are working together in unison for that shared customer value. You may focus on metrics more like the customer lifetime value and net dollar retention. And why might you do this? So we know that those individuals who, those companies who have shifted to the new type of operating model where they're really maximizing and growing their recurring revenue, they're sprinting ahead. They have lower churn rates, they have superior net retention, and overall, they're just growing faster. So what can you do when things look uncertain? Well, first and foremost, you embrace it. In our last webinar in part 1, we talked about how to deliver value early and often. We also talked about using automation to scale and staying current on customer health so that you can take action on risk. Today, with the help of Emily, we're also going to double down on the latter part of that, which is the risk and health section of it. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Emily to walk you through exactly how ProctorU has scaled through a risk and health program.
So to give you a little backstory of the problem and the challenge we had, which led us to the direction of Totango, was, as you can imagine, in the CS world, we had zero visibility into our client health, our risk, really just overall data of our clients. It was actually even to the point of, are these active clients? There was zero source of truth. We were working in multiple platforms. So for example, Salesforce, Zendesk, Tableau, Microsoft, and there was no consistency or standardizations across all of our zones and regions within the CS team. So that's when we took to Totango and said, help us figure out our lives, help us move forward and work smarter, not harder. So I like quotes within my team. So one that I felt was a really good one for this webinar series is, if we wait until we're ready, we're going to be waiting forever. So it's hard. It is really nerve-wracking when you first get into a software of, where do I even begin? So that kind of takes us to our next slide, is how do we look at our risk? So in order for us to even get to that point, we had to take a look at the health of our clients to kind of dig into it. So when we first started, and we've been implemented almost a year, which is super exciting, is we started out with our risk. And I will be honest, we are really great at customer success, but software and tools, we're really on our jam. So that's where the help of our Liz and the customer success team at Totango, they really helped us understand how to get started. So when we did our health take one, we started with our last touch. When was the last time we touched these clients? When was the last time we were engaged? Have we ever even reached out to these clients? We also did risk status with, do we think they're at risk? It might be based on CS sentiment, and then also risk status, and then customer success sentiment. So what we realized is that was a good starting point, but as Totango has grown in their offerings, we took full advantage of their second part, which was multidimensional health. So what we were able to do from our starting point was move into our take two of diving deep into our health. So what we have done with our multidimensional health is really looking at the different tiers of our clients. So we were able to break our client base, break into tier 1, 2, and 3. So our tier 3 clients are anybody less than 50K. Our tier 2 is anybody from 50 to 199. And then our top tier clients are anybody over 200,000. So then once we were able to break up into the tiers, we then looked at how do we want to look at the health within those. So what we were able to do is to break it down into percentages. So we did a year-over-year revenue, year-over-year volume, which should equate 1-to-1, our risk status, and then within that, our risk reason. So we'll dig into that in a little bit further. And then our relationship engagement. Do we think the clients like us? There's different multiple touch points. So we'll go into NPS and kind of our voice of the customer. And then we also wanted to know of the feedback. So what we were able to do with the help of Totango and Liz is break it into if then that into our health segment. So, and as you can imagine, probably with a lot of your businesses as well, is times are changing, the market demands are changing, and what our clients are really needing moving into a post-COVID world. And we needed to adapt within that and align with our clients' needs and wants. So what we did then next is into our health and NPS. So with Totango, within each one of our clients, you can, in a quick screenshot in one of our dashboards, see the breakdown of the health. So this is one of our clients here. So you can see that we don't have a ton of risk with them. They're pretty happy. Their work, they are growing over last year, their year over volume, revenue is up. But what you can see is that little red line right there of feedback. So we can think that they're doing great, right? They're growing, they're spending more with us, but sometimes no news is not good news. So we really wanted to break it into what's the feedback? What are our clients saying, as well as what are the students saying? Because we have different touch points within our institutions. So within that, we thought, okay, if clients are down in revenue, does that mean that they're unhappy? Maybe, maybe not. We can throw some surveys out there, but until we really hear what the clients are saying, that will help us dig into more of our risk buckets and categories. So what we were able to do last week is send out an NPS survey score. So we said, obviously on a score of 1 to 10, would you recommend us to a colleague? So when we first started, to kind of give you some feedback on that, when we first started Totango, we were at a -16 and we sent it out to everybody. And then we were like, well, that's probably not what we want to do. Let's dial it into people who actually have used our service within the last 90 days. So you can see in 2021, we were at a 23. And then since we've implemented more things along the way with the customer success team, our recent one is at a 27, which is fantastic. And then what we were able to do is, if you can see below, is then break it into the different tiers. So our tier 3 is, they're a pretty big book of business for us. Even though they are smaller and under 50K, they equate for 40% of our business. And then you can see tier 2 and tier 3. So what we did, breaking it into the tiers, is saying, okay, we know we have some risk. We know that we're down in volume and revenue year over year just because of post-COVID and everybody is conscious with budgets. How do we break this into when the board's asking us to project what the future of the company looks like? So if the next slide is when we looked at how many of our clients are at risk. So if I'm having to present and put our board slides together, these are not great numbers, but it is what it is. So let's dig into that more. So what we were able to do with our risk success block is break into, of our entire book of business, what do we think is at risk? How many accounts out of our entire book of business is at risk? And then within that, what does risk really mean? How do we break it into the different tiers? Is it customer friction, pricing, packaging? And I will say too, as like we did in our health, we kind of taken different stabs at this. And it's the great thing with Totango is that in a flip of a switch, it is so quick to aggregate the data and really figure out what we want, what story we want to tell. So what we did within our risk is breaking them into two categories. We broke it into customer friction, which included billing issues, poor student survey scores, poor student acceptance, ease of use. Do they like our product? Are there issues with our operations team? Is there no communication? And then we also broke it into the other bucket, which is price and packaging. So are they out to RFP? Is there down enrollment in the institutions? Are there cost concerns with our partners? Are they back to campus? Are there competitive threats out there? As we continue in the market, there's more and more competitors coming into the proctoring sector. So then what we were able to do with the segmentation and our custom metrics is break it into how many clients fell into our price and packaging. So then what we could do with that data then is take it and send it to our regional directors or AKA our sales team and say, we need to come up with a plan for these partners to make sure that we are securing this book of business based on price and packaging. And then also taking it to our president and our board and saying, we know we are, if we do nothing, we are going to lose 116 clients based on price and packaging. But then what has been great is our VP has been able to take this and say, we need to fix this. This is our plan in place. Let's move forward. And it's been really fantastic because when we have been on calls with our board and they want to know and dig into it, we pull up Totango and just like that, we have the segments and information at the fingertips. And if you can imagine, prior to this, it would have been a million different spreadsheets, a million different sources of truth, and not being able as quick to get them the data. So then another thing is, okay, we know the two risk categories. What do we do from there? We have customer friction and price and packaging. So what we realized is, okay, if we know that people are using our product, that makes it a little bit more sticky with our clients. So how do we base our communications off of, for our partners itself, is their academic calendars. We have our spring semester, we have our fall semester. So what we were able to do with Totango is customize the communication based on when they come back to campus. And we don't want to send a ton of communication for us in the summer because we know professors and deans, most of them take vacations. So with the help of Totango, we've been able to help drive product adoption and teach our clients how to fish instead of fishing for them. So it's been really easy to send out the communication and time it out so we know that we're not overloading them, that they're going to read the information that we're sending to them. And it has been really fantastic for them to see the engagement rate within our drive product adoption. And then another thing that we did, and if we want to move to the next slide, is what was the impact to this? How do we protect this? So we know that we want to drive product adoption. We know we need to look at price and packaging. We know we have customer friction, but ultimately at the end of the day, we have to report to our board of how we're doing for that. So prior to even probably 3 months ago, we used to have our team forecast what we thought the rest of the year was going to look back in January. Well, we used to use our business intelligence team to help within Tableau to forecast this. And then there was also multiple spreadsheets. We had finance coming to us, CFOs, boards, EVPs coming, and really wanting to understand what the rest of the year looked like. So with the help of Liz and Totango, we figured out how do we put our projections, how do we put our forecasting to help mitigate risk into Totango. So you can see with our executive dashboard, we were able to put in our volume and for our projected, where we are year to date and where we're trending for each month, and then roll up to each quarter, which is great. So you can see right here, we projected our AOP at 1.6 million. We actualized at 1.87 million, which is great. And then you can see quarter over quarter, year over year, and where we're trending. So another great slide you can see is when we implemented that, what does that look like? And it also helps for our team to see in real time, how are they going to be comped? Where are they trending? Because on our team, money motivates. So we wanted to see on the next slide too, how does that look like? How are we presenting to the board versus projected versus actual? And this helps look at our risk, it helps look at our friction, price and packaging, and really rolling it up into our forecasting. So I know I just went over a lot of information.
I love
Really
this slide,
quickly.
actually, Emily. This one especially speaks to me because it shows the just jump in efficiency that the team saw once we started implementing the forecasting of actuals versus projected. So right about June timeframe, or a little towards the end of May, we started to actually see our actuals eclipse projected, which is always what you want. That's a really good thing. Yay. And just giving more transparency to the team. So this is really neat.
It's been fantastic. And without the help of Totango, none of this would have been possible. So some actions and key takeaways of how to move forward is one thing that we thought was very helpful is, have you identified your area or areas of risk? If not, let's start there. Have you looked at your book of business and really broken it down into how do we move forward? What customers are at risk? And then tier them out from there. Part two, would we'd say is build a health and risk program to really dig in and secure that book of business. And then number three is monitor the metrics over time. Are we making impact? Do we have to pivot? Do we have to change our direction with the market?
Yeah.
So,
and one thing I'd like to add on number two with building your health and risk program, there are tons of resources within Totango to help you do this. And as Emily has mentioned, it can be iterative in nature, right? So before I was internal here at Totango, I was a customer as well, just like Emily. And I will tell you that one of the biggest things that was helpful for me was the quick ability to iterate on a health profile. So one may be set in place and you learn that maybe a metric or two needs to be tweaked or a threshold is off. It's easy enough to make that switch so that you can be on a smooth path looking at the metrics that are necessary. So keep that in mind when you're building. It doesn't have to be absolutely perfect. It's meant to be iterative in nature. And with that, there is a Q&A section open towards the bottom of your screen. So we're going to give everyone just a minute to input their questions, and then we'll begin answering them in about 1 to 2 minutes. While we do that and we collect your questions, I wanted to just let you guys know about the upcoming webinar that we have. This is part 3 of the 3-part series. This will be happening on July 21st. This is 5 strategies for customer growth. You'll definitely want to check it out. It'll be a great kind of cap on the 3-part series. And also, I would be remiss if I didn't mention our customer summit. We have our customer success summit coming up in September in Miami Beach. You will not want to miss this. It's going to be a really great action-packed couple of days where you can get your hands on all kinds of learnings within Totango. It's a great time to go and meet other customers of ours like Emily and see how they're utilizing Totango, share ideas with one another to make your overall CS programs even more robust. And many of the items that we mentioned today, you can start using them today. If you want to sign up for a free community edition, you can go to tatango.com/sign up and start getting your feet wet within Tatango, building health and risk, and growing from there. All right, so we have a couple of questions. We'll go ahead and transition. Kaya had asked if the slides will be shared along with the recording. Yes, we will get that information out to you. And we have another question, which is, does risk always have to be part of health? I will take this one. No, it is not a requirement for risk status or risk reason to be part of your health profile that you create within Tatango. I will, however, say that many customers do utilize risk in their health profile because they kind of go nicely together. Risk is assessing, really the way we like to look at it is the risk of not renewing. And so that's one kind of metric component that you may be interested in having in your health profile, but it's certainly not a requirement. You could build a risk program and not include it in your health score, but just have it run simultaneously within Tatango if you chose to do that. And then one other question that has come in here for Emily, which is, how did you determine the metrics to use in your health profiles?
So I will say it probably took us different iterations, as Liz knew, is we had never done health before. So we really kind of took our first stab at it and said, okay, we know what's important to the board. We know what's important to the CS team. How do we mirror them together? And then we just kind of did trial and error. And I will say, as Liz say, it's kind of fluid, is when we first did multidimensional health, all of our accounts went in the red. So our CS team freaked out because they care so much about their clients that we said, okay, is that really the truth? No, let's kind of then change the percentage because we know we're down in the market. We know we're down, but it doesn't mean our clients necessarily are unhappy. So we've been able to kind of change the percentage and breakdown as we move along, as we dig into it. So to go back to your question, it really was trial and error. We knew that we wanted to talk about revenue. We wanted to talk about volume. We know that customer sentiment was important, voice of the customer, and then looking at our product adoption. Does that answer your question?
Perfect. Yeah. And keep in mind also that there are, as Emily mentioned, there are two types of health calculation in Tatango. If you're interested in learning more, there's a deep dive webinar that is conducted every month. I actually lead it, so I'm happy to walk you through health. Yeah, so two different types of calculation. You can actually group them together in dimensions, which is what ProctorU opted to do, which gave them a really robust look at various metrics kind of in categories. Or you could implement a more all or nothing type model where it's just a set of metrics. And if any one of those metrics is in the poor, then the account would be in the poor. So lots of different ways to configure. And of course, any metric that you're bringing into Tatango is something that could be considered for you to use within your health. So keep that in mind while you're building. And then one additional question that has come in, how did you work through subject risk and bring that into your calculations? Oh, excuse me, subjective risk and bring that into your calculations?
So if I'm reading that correctly, how did we look to see what we thought the CS team versus the actuals? So we did a percentage based on customer sentiment. And is kind of, we were just talking about, is we adjusted over time, is we took what the customer said in their NPS or CSAT, as well as what our customer success specialist felt. Does that answer your question? And then we kind of weighted it based on that.
Yeah, and I can add here too. So internally at Tatango, we have a large risk program that has been built out. And there are multiple components to it. The one component, of course, would be a customer success manager, perhaps having a conversation with a customer or receiving an email or some action happening that would lead that CS team member to indicate that a customer is at a risk of not renewing. So in that case, they would then mark the customer at risk. However, there are hard metrics, if you will. So drops in usage, low number of success blocks, things of that sort that actually indicates from more of an automated perspective that a customer needs to be put into risk of not paying their bills on time, things like that. So you can kind of have the best of both worlds. And we actually would recommend this in both a health profile and in your risk program, that you incorporate both the kind of hard metrics, the automation that's going to say, oh, this metric is at X, then put them in risk, but also the sentiment side that Emily was talking about, because that's really the pulse and the lifeblood. Those are the people who are in front of your customers, talking to them day in and day out. And like the example that Emily showed, where the customer's health was actually overall green, but their feedback was poor, that's a perfect example for what we want to make sure that we're keeping in mind. So that's really where the kind of the marrying of the two, the hard and the soft or subjective type metrics come into play together. I hope that answered your question. Perfect. All right. And with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up. We really appreciate you all coming to this series, and I hope you can make the third part of this 3-part series. And again, this recording will be available in just a couple of days' time. We appreciate it, and we'll see you next time. Thanks so much.